The Things We All Carry is a podcast about first responders and their stories surrounding trauma on the job. The intention of this podcast is to raise awareness and share meaningful conversation around a subject often viewed as taboo or simply ignored. Be aware this content may be graphic and it is real. It may not be suitable for children or adults triggered by this subject matter. Welcome back to The Things We All Carry. This week, a couple weeks following Thanksgiving and a couple weeks before Christmas, is that weird period between holidays where everybody's kind of coming down off of one and ramping up for another one. We kind of get lost in the fever and the fervor of it all. And I just wanted to kind of take a moment and check in with everybody. One of the things I've let slide in my life over the last couple months is some accountability, some personal accountability for, health, nutrition, sleep. I'm trying to get back on track with that, and I need to get back on track with that. And it's a tough time of the year to do it. I think that this show that I have coming up after this intro, I think this show is a good one to have on now because I needed to hear some of it. I need to take care of some of the basics in my life. I need to clean up how I'm living, clean up how I'm working out, clean up the harried and hurried parts of my life where I'm not giving enough attention. And so I've started to do some of that. One of the things I've done is I reached out to my therapist and I asked her for a reference on some psychological testing. We'll get this whole answer of this ADHD thing out of the way for me. It's going to take a bit, but I'm started down that route. I'm also trying to talk more. I need to get back in for another therapy session. And I need to admit that I need it as much as anybody. One of the things that's tough to do is to take your own advice. And I sit here and I do this show and we talk about therapy and we talk about talking. We discuss making changes. We discuss, how you stay healthy, how you maintain a positive mental health. And then I don't do some of the things that I preach. And I need to do a better job of my own accountability, holding myself to the fire. I need to talk more. I need to express myself to those in my life, those closest to me, those around me. I need to let people know where I am. I need to check in with people and find out where they are. And that has slid a bit I don't know, I couldn't even put a time frame on it. It's kind of gone by the wayside, and that's my fault. It's all my fault. And I can change that, and that's the route that I'm starting to take right now. In addition, I need to start making some changes for myself when it comes to the way I'm eating, the way I'm working out, the way I'm recovering. Back in June, I decided to stop drinking for a year. It was a challenge, and I'm 6 months into it. I guess, Christmas Eve will be 6 months. It hasn't been as tough as I thought it would be. There have been a few times where I wanted drinks, and those times felt kind of overpowering, but I didn't give in. And so I have another 6 months to go, and we'll see what happens after the year. That's just an example of what you can do when you just make a decision to do it. I got away from some of the smaller things like cold plunge. I did it religiously for a number of weeks there, and then it kind of fell by the wayside when I had to go and spend some time in Pennsylvania at the end of my mom's life. I'm back into that. I'm sitting here in a pair of sweatpants and a hoodie, and I'm warming up after a cold plunge this morning, and it was probably mid 40s in the water, and I spent a few minutes there, and it was damn cold. It's a shock to the system, but it's a good shock to the system. And so now I look to the future with things like cold plunges and saunas and eating well and working out and organizing how I want to run this show, organizing how I want to release the show, how I want to move the show forward with all the parts and pieces that I've talked about and I've shared with a few people, the things I want to do, the grand ideas I have. And I know I can't do it all at once. I can't take care of all my personal life at once. I can't take care of all my show life at once, my professional life at once. So I had to take small steps with everything. And so then I worry that I'm going to frustrate people. I worry that I'm going to frustrate myself. And I need to be patient with myself. And I need to understand that people will also be patient with me. I mean, let's be honest, people have already been patient with me. Maybe I've been given more patience from people than I ever deserved. And it's time to repay some of that, I suppose. And the way I can repay it is by taking that personal responsibility, taking charge of some things and not sitting back as much. So maybe pushing forward with a few items and not waiting for something to come to me, but more pushing and more grabbing for what I need or what I want, and realizing it's not always selfish, but it's just necessary at times. I'm faced with a daunting task this week, and I've bounced around these ideas in my head of how to do it and how to craft it and how to give it, and I'm worried, I'm nervous, and I'm scared all at the same time. I need to write a eulogy for my mom, and I'm not sure where to go with it. I have so much I want to say about her, and then I have some stuff that I just want to keep for me. I want to craft a eulogy that will honor her and kind of encapsulate her. I don't want to. It I don't know the framework for eulogies, and so I'm kind of learning that, and that's a weird thing to learn. I don't want to learn it. I never wanted to learn it. So here I am reading a couple of eulogies, trying to fit my thoughts into those, and I think that for me to do it, I have to scrap that idea. It's not my thoughts don't fit into the framework of others all the time. It's not something I've always been comfortable with. The fact that I don't always think like others. So I need to sit down and I need to just start writing. But again, it's one of those things that I just don't want to do, but I do want to have that chance to honor her with the words. And so at some point in the next day or two, I'll start that process and I'll just start writing and I'll spew out some thoughts and some memories and some anecdotes, and I'll try to tie her 80 plus years on this earth together to present to people. And then I'll do what I ironically think is one of my greatest fears, and I'll stand up and I'll read it to a group, to a room of people, family and friends, everyone that knows me, but I'll still be nervous. I'll stumble over my words. I'll break down in tears a few times, and hopefully I'll get through it. And then I think at that point, that healing needs to start in earnest. I think with that, it will start to really close a chapter. So that means we're looking towards opening more chapters, right? Writing our next chapter. And what a perfect time to do it with the new year coming around. So in January, I'll come back and take a little bit of a break, like I said, with the show. I'll work on some show stuff. I'll work on some stuff for myself personally and professionally. And I'll rest my brain a little bit and come back in January kind of refreshed, hopefully with a little bit of a new vigor for it. And we'll kick it off and see where we go from there in the new year. Again, I just want to thank everybody for tuning in, for supporting me, for reaching out in those moments where I kind of needed some words. I always think it's very odd that people happen to reach out at just the right time. Like somehow they intuit that I need to hear something. And so I had a few people reach out over the last few weeks and just, little short notes to say, hey, we listen. We like what you do. It's important to us. Keep doing it. And kind of just some motivation that I need. I've been very grateful for that. And I'm honored to hear those words. Let's move on to the show. Welcome to episode 94 of The Things We All Carry. Today I'm joined by sisters Lauren and Renee. Lauren and Renee are both nutrition and health coaches, and they go by the term of biohackers. And you can find them on Instagram under at Biohacker Babes. And that's what they do. They talk about biohacking, they talk about health, nutrition, fitness, um, everything that you can think of that is going to benefit you and change you for the better. The things we talked about, we got into their backgrounds, we got into where they went to school, why they wanted to biohack. Turns out that their father is who they would call the original biohacker, and they were introduced to this at a young age, and they grew up with this, and so they were taught this importance of experimentation and individualization. So from that individualization and this experimentation and searching out for the edge, I guess, for what's going to optimize your health and wellness. Their podcast, the Biohacker Babes, and I'll read this straight from their bio. It says, aims to create insight into the body's natural healing abilities, strengthen your intuition, and empower you with techniques and modalities to optimize your health and wellness. So the things we talked about on this show this week was we started with the basics and what you can do before you even start biohacking. We talked about gut health. We talked about continuous glucose monitoring, saunas, red lights, cold plunges, and we talked about exogenous ketones, fasting, breath work, HRV, and what heart rate variability can do for you and that feedback. And then we actually get into a little bit of a discussion on plant medicine, which I think we want to continue on to a later date and maybe make an episode of that on its own. We talked about psilocybin and how it can help you in your physical and emotional journey. To me, this was a fascinating conversation because it's science and it takes a break from talking about these heavy subjects that we always talk about on the show. It came at a good time for me, is what it did. Came at a time where I don't think I was looking forward to another heavy show, and so this one fills the bill for me. It fits it perfectly as a chance to kind of get lost in a 2-hour conversation. And it was informative, it was fascinating, and it was engaging, and I can't thank them enough for coming on and, like I said, spending 2 hours of their day with me and the audience. And I hope you guys find some value in it, and you reach out, you follow them, and you learn what you can do beyond the basics with biohacking. So you guys get out there, go enjoy yourselves, and do something for yourself. A quick reminder to please help us build a community which not only recognizes, but supports each other through the struggles and recovery. Reach out through Instagram at The Things We All Carry or email my story at thethingsweallcarry.com to offer support and share your story. Please remember to leave a review on iTunes and give a shout out to any first responder you know, love, or care about. Y'all enjoy the show. Feel free.
Okay.
All right. So if you guys are ready, let's do this. All right, welcome back to The Things We All Carry. And today I have the Biohacker Babes on, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves so I don't screw up too badly. I tend to do that. So I'll say good morning or good afternoon, and thanks for joining me. And why don't you give us a quick background of each of you?
Oh, well, thank you so much for having us. And I love the opportunity to introduce ourselves. We just emceed an event, and I was like, oh, I want to make sure that the guests or the speakers get introduced the way that they want to. So honestly, really appreciate that. We are sisters. People think it's just like we're gal pals. We grew up together. Sisters. We have a podcast called the Biohacker Babes. We are both nutrition practitioners, or you could say at large, we are health coaches, which a lot of people have a big question mark around. Like, what does that mean? It's anything that can optimize your health through hormones, gut, digestion, blood sugar, better sleep, better mental capacity, stress management. That list goes on and on. And my name is Lauren, and I live in New York City. We grew up in Maryland, but I've been in New York for over 20 years. And we're biohackers, which we can explain what biohacking is, but I'll let Renee jump in.
Awesome.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm the other half. Lauren's sister, Renee. I live in Las Vegas now. I've been here 5 years. Still an East Coaster at heart, though. And yeah, I think a little bit more background. I mean, Lauren and I, we were exposed to biohacking at a young age because our dad, we call him the OG biohacker. We had like an infrared sauna, PEMF mat, red light therapy, all these things when we were kids. Didn't really know what it was all about. Just thought our dad had some interesting toys around the house. But as ballet dancers growing up, we had we always had some kind of injury, some inflammation, and our dad would be to the rescue with one of his devices or some homeopathy or some kind of supplement. So that kind of like laid the foundation for us to be open minded and curious about what other options there are when it comes to health optimization. And then we both went off to college. And although I went to Florida, Lauren went to New York, we had similar stories in that we had our own health issues. And that made us kind of circle back to what else can we do? How, traditional medicine personally didn't have the answers for me. I had chronic fatigue syndrome, and that led me to become a biohacker myself. So I got really into nutrition and sleep optimization, stress management, and then some of these fancier technology and devices to optimize our health. And
So you said
here we are
Florida.
today.
Where did you go to school?
I did my undergrad at University of Tampa.
Okay. And how do you what qualifies you? What schooling do you have to be a biohacker? I know it's a silly question, but I'm curious.
It's the school
Yeah.
of curiosity.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, at first I know there's no certification or school body that gives you that title, but biohacking is really a way of life. It's a lifestyle, you know. We can explain biohacking has many, many definitions. We could explain ours, but to be a biohacker, you just have to be willing to experiment on yourself and want to optimize your own health potential.
Okay. So what's your what undergrad? Do you have master's degrees? Where are we at in school?
Yeah.
So
Well, I got my master's in nutrition
Okay.
because I was just so curious. I was reading all these nutrition books and I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do with my career. And my dad was actually the one that said, to quote him, he said, "What is your Friday night essence?" I had never heard this before. And it's
Hmm.
basically, if you're home on a Friday night, you don't really have any plans, what would you do in your spare time? I said, well, I would be reading nutrition books. My nightstand at the time had, 10 books high. And he said, that's what you need to go back to school for. So I went back, got my master's in nutrition. But really, nutrition is like a small piece of the pie of everything when it comes to biohacking and health optimization.
I love that
mhm.
term. Yeah, the
Yeah.
Friday night essence. I love that term because it makes you think. All right, yeah, what would I do with when I have that time just to myself?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really shines through what your curiosity is or what your passion is.
So, Lauren, what's your degree in?
So I actually went to school for dance. I moved to New York to become a performer. And so I started my career dancing in dance companies and on Broadway. And through that, I wanted to optimize my physical body. So I became a personal trainer. And that was the beginning of my health journey is personal training. And then I soon realized that not all the answers were found in the gym, that we actually had to pull in other pieces of the puzzle through optimization. So I got certified in a few different bodies, but the Czech Institute, where Renee and I actually together became holistic lifestyle coaches. And then I also became a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner. So I learned how to script and run labs, understand biochemistry by looking at lab values. And that was like a big foray into the biohacking, like using data to uncover blind spots and really kind of get to the root cause of what could be driving our symptoms or our ailments or our challenges from day to day. So, functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner, and then that has split off into many different other interests. I do prep and integration for plant medicine work as well, but it's under this whole metabolic health coaching umbrella.
What is a quick definition of holistic nutrition? I'm curious.
I consider it just, well, holistic or whole body approach. So, not thinking that it's as simple as, I don't know, calories in, calories out, but like what is the nutrient density of the food? How is it affecting all aspects of your body? How are other aspects of your body affecting what you are eating and how you're digesting and absorbing the nutrients? So to me, holistic is like whole body approach.
Yeah.
That's my
Cool.
take.
That was going to be my guess, but I'm sure that I'll have people in the audience just curious, and so I wanted to clarify it. And thanks.
Yeah,
Um,
of course.
Before we go much further, I want to ask a question about music because music's a big part of my life, and it's kind of with me wherever I go. And if I'm cooking in the kitchen or at the gym or driving down the road or whatever, I usually have something on, and I'm always looking for something new. So, Renee, what was the last song you heard?
Oh, I actually, I love music too. It makes me feel alive. I really love EDM. It's
Okay.
just like I can feel my heart beating with the music. And so I think the last thing I listened to this morning while I was doing my makeup, I was kind of getting um awake. I'm on the West Coast, so I'm 3 hours behind you all. But Elderbrook, I'm trying to remember which song it was, but Elderbrook is one of my favorite DJs at the moment.
I was looking
Great
because
music.
I'm not a big EDM person, but I found a, I'm trying to, and you'll pardon me, I'm gonna stall for a second, because I found this EDM version, and now I'm not gonna find it. Nah, I'll find it while we're talking. I think you'll like it. It was an EDM version of an Ozzy Osbourne song, I believe. So I'll find it. But it was kind of, I normally it's not my genre, but I was like, well, actually that one was good. I'm throwing that on my playlist. So I'll check out what you
Yeah.
suggested. Lauren, what
Nice.
about
Yeah,
you?
I
What
love when
was?
they
Oh,
remake
oh,
other
yeah,
songs. Yeah.
yeah. I love it. Mashups are kind of, I get into it for some reason. I just nerd out on them. So Lauren, what was the last song you heard?
Actually, I don't think I played any music today, but I went to a Lauryn Hill concert over the weekend. So I'm going to say
Nice.
her singing was the last thing that I heard. She
Okay.
is on her 25th anniversary tour of The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill, which came out in 1998. And
Yes.
I was obsessed with that album. I tried to change my name to the spelling of her name with the Y. I tried to convince all my friends. I don't think it really stuck, but that is the last thing that I
That's
heard. And
funny.
I really love live music. I mean, I always have music on in the house, but and actually, I make my own music. I turn everything into a song. I have this strange habit of if you say something, I'll find something. I'll make a song out of it, or it'll trigger a memory of a song. I'll sing that. But live music is just so inspiring to like
Yes.
watch an artist in their
Hmm.
speaking of essence, like in their essence, like living and breathing this and communicating like their soul to us. You know, that sounds a little woo, but
No, I don't think
I
that's,
love
yeah.
that feeling. Love that feeling.
Actually, and I don't know if you're familiar with him, but Billy Strings, um,
Mm-mm.
he's a neo bluegrass performer, but his live shows are apparently just off the charts. It's just an immersive kind of thing, and that's going to be the next concert I'm going to, and that's in a couple of weeks in Baltimore, and I can't wait to experience that because that's what it is. You could say it's kind of a woo thing, but he gets so into the music, just the whole crowd is just immersed in his immersion in his music, and it's just it's. I've heard it's one of those out of body experience type things to witness. So I'm excited.
So
And
Cool. That'd be fun. Yeah, I
before
will
I go
say
into much, go ahead.
Elderbrook too. If you ever have a chance to see him live, I think a lot of people think like, oh, EDM DJs, they're just like hitting a button on their computer or something. But man, he is like playing the piano, he's singing, he's dancing, he's DJing, like he does it all. It's like a full performance.
Cool. I like it. I like
Yeah.
it.
Mhm.
Before I forget, it was actually Iron Man redone by a group. I think they're brothers, and they go by Yoki, Yookie. So that's who I found. Somehow they came up on my TikTok algorithm, and I don't know why, I don't know how, because I like I said, I don't listen to EDM. So, but I was happy it did.
Nice.
Cool.
So now we got that out of the way. All right.
Fun.
I think we kind of covered it in your introduction, but why biohacking? Why is it important to you guys?
Yeah, I think we both came up against health challenges and were not given answers by the traditional medical model. So we were running into walls, and biohacking was a way to not run into that wall, to look in different directions and explore different options and pathways that could help optimize what we knew was like our true health potential. Like we're not meant to feel bad. And our medical model, at no fault of theirs, is more concerned with treating disease and preventing death rather than preventing chronic issues. And so we really live in like the prevention optimization world where we think the ceiling is so high and that we can feel as amazing as we want to feel every day. And so biohacking was a way to explore that potential and to find alternative ways to make ourselves feel best. I would say, especially as females, the biohacking is really important because a lot of the research that's been done on everything from nutrition, exercise, sleep, nervous system has been done on males. And so there's not
Yeah.
a lot of bio individual help, I would say, to simplify from the research and the literature, which is then trickling down into the mainstream medical model. So it's really about finding our own answers and solutions and really raising the bar on what we deserve to feel.
I never thought about that, and obviously I'm coming from the male's point of view. I've never thought about the fact that it's so male heavy in the research and development even, I'd imagine that that you kind of have to blaze your own path as a female.
Yeah. Well, women are
Yeah, actually,
tricky. Our hormones
yeah.
change every day, and so to put us in a research lab is much more expensive, and there's just more variables. So, of course, it's difficult, but it's happening more and more. I'm sorry, Renee.
I was gonna say, I think until I forget when it started, but until 1993, women were actually not allowed to be a part of research. A lot of what Lauren said, like our physiology is very complicated. I know people, men joke, women are so complicated, but like physiologically we are. But they also were concerned about doing certain studies on women if they were of reproductive age, because
Oh,
certainly if a woman gets pregnant during a study of some sort, there's
yeah.
a potential lawsuit, I guess, there. So women were
Mm.
just not allowed to be in the research.
Or even worse, or lose a pregnancy or prevent it from a pregnancy because of the research, I would imagine.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
So that's where the N of one experimentation comes in. I think also just like the bio individual component. Like people want to say, this is the best diet, this is the best workout, cold plunges every day, right? But we're
Right.
all so unique. I mean, Lauren and I, 2 years apart, we're pretty similar genetically, age, everything, but we still have to do things differently when it comes to our biohacks. And I think the only way you're going to figure that out is by staying curious, being, aware of what's going on in your body, finding that intuition of what your body is telling you that you need, and figuring it out for yourself. Like there's no offense, I don't think there's any doctor out there that's going to ever get to know your body as well as you know your body.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So, what are the basics that we as first responders or people in general should be doing before we even consider biohacking? Because obviously, biohacking is more of a fine tuning, correct?
I think it can be more broad.
Okay.
I think that probably most people, even that are listening to this podcast, are already biohackers in my definition. Because my definition is if you've done anything that could potentially alter your biology, you're a biohacker. So if you've
Okay.
gone out in the sunshine to increase your vitamin D levels, that's a biohack to me, and it's free, right? So I would say most people are probably already biohackers, but certainly like the foundational things that are free, we always want to start with. And that's where I think the ancestral hacking comes in. It's like, what did our ancestors do? I think our ancestors were the first biohackers. Getting your feet on the earth, grounding, getting these negative ions that the planet is giving us, fresh air, getting outside more, getting in the sunshine, circadian rhythm, which I know is really hard because you're working 24 hours on, 24 hours
Right.
off. Circadian rhythm disorders are huge in your industry. So, how can we get back in tune with our planet and what the nature is providing us for free?
Yeah.
So
And I
that
think
means
our ancestors were biohackers, but of course it wasn't called biohacking then because
right.
it wasn't, we didn't need to step out of our norm. It was just so integrated with the nature and the rhythm of the sun. But now our modern lifestyle is really designed against us with so much indoor light. There's
Mhm.
pollution, obviously, careers and jobs that take us out of that normal cycle. So the biohacking is an interruption in that path that we've like slowly been conditioned to fall into. It's an interruption so we can say, wait, I could possibly feel better. And so it's not a nuance. It is the basics. It is prevention and optimization. It's really a lens that we can look at all of these like basic pillars through. Something like sleep. We all know like roughly around 8 hours of sleep is good for us, but that could be different for all three of us right here. So biohacking would be, well, let's look at some sleep data. Let's do some subjective feedback tracking to see how do I feel going into bed at this time versus this time? Can I make it more efficient? That's the biohacking to make sure that your sleep architecture and design is designed for you. Goes for supplements, goes for food. I mean, we could take all of these kind of big opinions and trends out there, but chances are intermittent fasting is not right for any of us. Or like, what time of day do we break our fast? How do we break our fast? Those are the like nuances that do fall into the foundational pieces of all health pillars.
Well, I can say from 10 plus years in the fire service, I can tell you that as firefighters in general, we're not taking care of the basics before we start doing cold plunges or red lights or saunas. Um, so I
And
know
that's
that
okay. We could
and
talk
well,
about why that's okay.
okay. Well, and I was going to say because the pillars that we talk about and I talk about quite a bit with people that I know and on the show are, nutrition, sleep, gut health somewhat, but I don't know a lot about gut health, so I don't talk much about it because I don't want to come from a position of ignorance and say something that's wrong. But but nutrition, sleep, exercise, and alcohol, I think, are the huge things for firefighters and first responders in general. And I think that my message to everybody out there is like you can take all of this into account, but please dial that other stuff in as well or before. Just because I know a lot of us go home and we start drinking or we eat our $5 meals at the firehouse and it's, it's just it's not the best food in the world, but at least we're eating something. And the sleep is what sleep is for us. If you look at my Garmin and my sleep data, it's like a roller coaster. So it's kind of it's all over the place. Even on my days off, it's all over the place. So
Hmm,
I guess
get that.
I just want to get those fellow firefighters to kind of normalize a little bit before even going too far into the biohacking. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but we could consider like cold and sauna a foundational practice. If you think about like our
Okay.
ancestors that didn't have AC and they didn't have, heat in their homes, they were naturally exposed to this. And so to me, that is a foundational practice that can optimize our physiology and optimize the nervous system. And, like, you're not really overlooking the basics because you have a very specific schedule that you're probably not going to change anytime soon, right? Like, you're providing an incredible service to humanity, and you've committed to that, and that is your lifestyle. So, how can we pull in these other modalities to just support the body and help it work better? And from our perspective, like, the biggest challenges for firefighters are nervous system, right? Being in fight or flight, nervous system
Yeah.
dysregulation, which is implicated with gut health, which we can get to. Toxins, right? You're exposed to a lot of toxins, and then altered circadian rhythm. So we could pull in these other modalities to just make that work better, knowing that your foundations are going to look different from mine because my lifestyle and my day to day is just different than yours. And that's okay, right? We're not trying to reinvent the wheel here. It's just given your challenges and your lifestyle and your preferences and your goals, what tools do we have to pull out of the toolbox to help your physiology work better?
So what are the fundamentals of gut health?
Mm. I would say there's like two big categories, and Renee, I'll let you
Okay.
jump in, but we want to prevent. And that would be like reducing offenders, eliminating things that we could be sensitive to, allergic to. And that could be bio individual. That could be something really random, like a banana. And that's why we like look at lab testing or CGM. Or it could just be like processed foods in general. We know that processed foods, processed oils can be really rancid and inflammatory to the body. So that takes a little bit of personalization to figure out like what do we need to avoid pulling in, and then sometimes we need to pull other things in to help optimize. And there's a lot of ways to do that. But I would say some sort of fasting is always really helpful to the gut because our body naturally heals and regenerates if we give it the downtime to do that. So getting to know your personal sensitivities, giving it some downtime for your gut to do what it normally, naturally is capable of doing, and then I think we have to pull in the stress component because your vagus nerve, which is essentially a big highway that connects your brain to your gut, there's signals, there's afferent and efferent signals going up and down all day long. And we can get into this chicken or the egg situation where it's like, is that fight or flight disrupting my gut? Or is my gut already disrupted and now it's causing more of a fight or flight response, stress response? So we really have to look at all components. But the gut health topic is quite a big one, but I would say that's the biggest one. Like avoiding things that are offending our gut and then pulling in some of the better things with fasting or certain supplements or enriching our diet with more diverse foods. Like we are microbes. So we actually want a lot of microbes in our gut. The more we can flourish in our microbiome, the more capability we have to respond to the environment. What would you add to that, Renee?
I mean, on the nutrition topic, I would say it can be very simple and it can be very complex. So I think it depends on where someone is starting. Like you said, the $5, I know, fast food meals. It's like maybe all we do is we cut that out and replace it with just something that's whole foods, right? Food that came from the planet, food that our body recognizes as food, not chemicals and additives
Mhm.
and processed things. And then once we have a good grasp on that, then we can look at, do we need to tailor our macros based off of our genetics, our gut health, our stress, our physical activity? And then we can keep going further. Do we need to look at lab testing to really fine tune it on a bio individual level? But I think if you're still eating processed food, like that's just number one thing to focus on. because we
Hmm.
know that that's full of things that are going to disrupt the gut health. And like Lauren said, poor gut health leads to more sympathetic activity and vice versa. So, also before you eat, a lot of us are eating in a stressed out state. Can you sit
Yeah.
down? This is one of my favorite biohacks.
Mm.
Sit down and close your eyes. Take 3 really deep breaths. It only takes a couple seconds before you eat your food. That's just saying, hey, I'm in a safe place, get that parasympathetic rise, and then your body will digest the food better. So I don't care if it's like this raw, organic, healthy, perfect salad or it's Five Guys. If you're in a stressed out state, your stomach is going to revolt against whatever you're putting in. So you could almost argue that stress management is more important than what we're eating. But again, whole foods. So, most Americans are not eating a whole food diet.
No,
Hmm.
not at all. And
Yeah.
if you look at grocery prices now, it's even worse.
Yeah. Well, I would add to that, like, it's so hard to tell someone to do this. Like, it's easier said than done, but don't stress out about the food that you have put in front of you. Like, if that is your only option, you've already made the best choice for you. Don't sit there and be stressed with your meal, even if it is Five Guys. Like, if that was the best option, like Renee said, tell your body you're safe, get into a parasympathetic and eat it. Because if you chose that and then you're going, "Oh, man, I shouldn't be eating this. This is bad
Mm.
for me. Oh god, I could have done better." You're telling your body that it's not safe, and so you're not gonna digest well, you're not gonna metabolize well, it's gonna keep you in that sympathetic state. So, obviously, like, the food supply is an issue. It's very expensive to get healthy food. Often we don't have time, we don't have the resources, so we're all doing our best, and I think we should keep aiming to do better and better if we can. But once that food is in front of you, the number one priority is to get your body into a safe parasympathetic rest and digest state, no matter what you're eating.
Is there such a thing as and I guess, well, while you guys were talking, because the gut health affects so much, the parasympathetic, inflammation, and you guys know better than I do. Is there such a thing as is gut health like the basic to health, or is it just a multitude of things that build this big base for you?
I
I
mean,
would say
the
yes.
saying, yeah, disease begins in the gut, right? That's a pretty famous quote. And yeah, I think because when we see people with a, more diverse gut microbiome, they can be more resistant or resilient against maybe poor food choices, maybe the stress of life, the toxins that are coming at them. So yeah, I think if we really prioritize the gut and whatever that means to you, because it's going to be a bio individual plan, I
Mhm.
think we can see more resilience. And resilience, I'll probably say that word 50 times today because I think for firefighters, resilience is the most important thing to achieve. And like Lauren was saying, adding in the sauna or the cold plunge or any of these hormetic stressors, fasting, certain types of exercise, while they may be the next level biohack, it's still getting to the foundation of how can we be more resilient because you're not going to be able to change your 24-hour on, 24-hour off schedule, your erratic sleep schedule. So what are all the things we can do so we're more resilient to all of those things? And yeah, a very diverse gut microbiome is key there. And the number one
Mhm.
thing is just to eat a variety of food. Most Americans are eating, I think, on average 12 foods per week, right? You
Mm.
go to the grocery store, you grab the same chicken, the bananas, the broccoli, or whatever. It's like you're doing the same foods over and over again. Our gut wants diversity. Again, going back to our ancestors, they were eating hundreds of different foods throughout the
Mm.
year.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah, and I
yeah.
think food timing really plays a big role in gut health. So our metabolism, especially our glucose metabolism, is really aligned with light and dark cycles, so our circadian rhythm, the rise of the sun, and then darkness at night. So when it is dark outside, our body wants to be producing melatonin so we get that rest and repair, which I know is not always possible for first responders, but we could follow a simple rule of condensing our feeding window and just having boundaries for ourselves. It's different for every person, but having some kind of boundary to give our body that downtime to rest and recover. Even if we're not necessarily sleeping, we can give our gut the downtime from food. That's like a very big mistake that all people make, not just first responders, I think, but we spread our eating over such a long period of time. And so that could be considered a stressor. We're constantly keeping our body, our metabolism, our gut like online working, right? If you think about first responders, there's always like perceived threats. We're always like fight or flight, ready to go. Your gut, your glucose metabolism is the same way. If you keep it on edge, ready to go, it never gets that rest and repair it needs. So one simple hack you could do is just condense your feeding window, and you can figure out for your lifestyle and your schedule what hours that falls within, but simply just condensing so you get the repair.
Yeah, it's you always no, don't always. You hear it less now, thankfully. You kind of I used to hear, "Well, I'm eating for the fire," or "I'm eating for the work I'm going to do." Well, we don't always get that work, so then you're stuck with that food, and there's extra calories and extra whatever in your
Yeah.
gut because you didn't get the work, and so, it doesn't always make sense to say that. Um,
Mhm.
Yeah.
you keep saying personalized because everything about this is gonna be personalized. I mean, everybody's gonna need or require something different because we're all very different from each other. Just like you guys said, your sister's 2 years apart, share some genetic material, but you're very different in your approaches. Um, how do you get tested about your gut health? How do you know what's good for your gut health?
Mm. Good question.
Yeah. I mean, there are labs you can do, like a stool analysis if you want to really do a deep dive. They're not perfect, but I think it can
Mhm.
give you a little bit of guidance if is there a candida overgrowth, are there parasites, viral pathogens, poor pancreatic function where you need more digestive capacity, things like that. I mean, that's kind of like one end of the spectrum. Um the other thing is just maybe get a CGM, a continuous glucose monitor. So that's we think of it as like, oh, it's measuring maybe how much sugar we're eating, right? It goes way beyond that. So
Yes.
Lauren does a lot of glucose coaching and she can see if someone is maybe reacting to a food, like a food intolerance, food sensitivity, food allergy, or if they're just eating in a stressed out state, their glucose will rise. So we always recommend someone to get a CGM for maybe 2 or 4 weeks just to experiment and really get to see what's going on in your body. I think that's like the greatest um opportunity to see what's going on in the body.
Yeah, that real-time feedback is really
Yeah,
helpful.
and I know that we had CGM on the list of biohacks, and I'm curious about it because it's something that I've heard for a while now, and I've been curious about, interested in, but at the time when I first started hearing about it, it was prescription only, I believe. Is it available on over the counter now, and how do you do that?
Yeah, so there are several companies that their mission is to give access to a, I'll say, quote unquote, healthy, non-diabetic population. And they are becoming more accessible. You usually have to go through one of these companies where there's a membership, but they'll send you sensors. It's connected to an app. So you can see in real time how your glucose is responding to your food, to your stress, to your sleep. I think over time, the cost is going to come down as people realize that this is such an amazing prevention tool. For so long, they were only for diabetics, but we know diabetes doesn't happen overnight. You could be pre diabetic for 20 years. So, what opportunities are we missing out on in those 20 years before you get that diagnosis from your physician? And for anyone listening that doesn't know about a CGM, it's a continuous glucose monitor. So, it's just a little monitor. It's just like a tiny little filament. It's way smaller than a needle filament that goes into traditionally like the back of your arm, or you can wear it on your belly, and it's measuring the interstitial fluid. So it's actually estimating what your glucose is at any given point in time, and really revealing to see like what is your glucose doing overnight when we should be in rest and recovery. How is it responding after dinner? It's different for everyone. I have clients where it's like their kryptonite is nighttime. For some people, it's like,
Mm,
morning. I can never get my glucose to behave in the morning. For some people, it's just kinda gently elevated all day long. I mean, there's so many different options here and stories that are being told through the CGM. So, as Renee said, it's like one of the most fantastic ways to personalize. We can go, "Oh, these are your optimal feeding windows. This is exactly how much protein you need. This is how much hydration you need. This is gonna be the best time for your physiology to do a workout." And then, like, we get real answers. Otherwise, we're just guessing, right? And we can
right.
guess, we can run experiments, but it's better to cut through the noise and like get some real concrete answers sooner. People deserve that.
Do you start recognizing changes in your glucose through a CGM in your body? So what I mean is, do you start going, "Oh, that's why I feel this way now. Now I know that's my glucose. That's not this or that." And so do you start recognizing those patterns, and then you can kind of remove it and say, "Okay, I don't need that now. I know when I feel this way, I've elevated my glucose, or when I'm feeling this way, I'm a little low in my glucose. Do you find that that starts to happen?
Yeah, I would say that's my secret goal for everyone that I work with is that they won't need it forever. It's a drop in so we can really get to know your physiology. Of course, there's always an opportunity to revisit the CGM because our bodies are dynamic. They're always changing and like our environment changes. So things may actually change over time. But Renee and I both believe like we don't want to be attached to data wearables for the rest of our life. Like technology is awesome, but what we really want for our clients and our audience is to reconnect with intuition. So, yes, as you said, it's like, can we start connecting the dots and go, oh, right. That's why I'm feeling hangry, or that's why my energy is crashing, or that's why I just like was super irritable or couldn't sleep, right? And then we train our body to go, I don't want to feel that. I know what I need to do intuitively to feel better in that situation.
Yeah, and I think I liken that to sleep a little bit because, I wear a Garmin, but I used to wear a Whoop as well, and Whoop I liked for my sleep, but then it started to get, I don't know, it like you said, it was predictable. You know, I knew if I felt one kind of, this is gonna sound weird, I guess, maybe if I felt one kind of tired, I knew that it was because my heart rate never came down to where I needed it overnight.
Mm,
Or if I felt a
yeah.
different kind of tired, it's because I had this restless sleep during the night. And so I started to be able to, okay, no, I know what that was. And now I know I'm overtraining, or I didn't train enough, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And so
Amazing. That's the
I
goal.
kind of
Yeah,
liken
yeah,
it to the same thing, I suppose.
Mhm. It
definitely.
takes some work, but that's why
Yeah.
we
I
get
mean, I wore
answers.
it for 2 or 3 years before it got to that point. It took me a while to go, wait a second, I'm not utilizing this the way I need to utilize it. And so it was interesting. And once I did
Yeah.
utilize it the way I needed to utilize it, I got rid of it. So it's the funny part.
Great. Don't
Yeah.
need it anymore. Like I think that's the gold standard, right?
Yeah,
Yeah. I
definitely.
mean, I was wearing an Aura ring and a Bio strap for 3 years. And then I don't know, it just hit me one day, the Bio strap. I felt like I learned what I needed to learn from it and I stopped wearing it. I still wear the Aura ring because that still kind of keeps me on track.
Right.
Um, kind of rewards my good behaviors,
Okay.
sleeping well, not having alcohol, caffeine too late, watching
Yes.
how my workouts are impacting it, and then different supplements, how that's impacting it. But the Aura ring is like my go-to to keep on hand. I love it.
It and I've heard good things about it. Is that kind of a gold standard of wearables?
Well, it's really good for, I think, the readiness component. So, looking at especially like resting heart rate and HRV overnight, I think the sleep data is pretty accurate amongst the wearables. And then I also just find it's really easy. I
Yeah.
didn't really love having this like big, bulky strap on my wrist. The ring, I don't even notice that it's there. So,
Mhm.
easier for me. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the sleep metrics are probably the best of any wearable out there. I mean, the gold standard for sleep metrics is polysomnography, but no, we're not going to do that
Yeah.
nightly. And what we really like about the Oura Ring, so it's not really activity driven, whereas like the Whoop or the Garmin, you can measure heart rate recovery within a workout. We're primarily focused on sleep and recovery, which for us, that is the number one pillar. If sleep and recovery is not in place, then nothing else that you're doing, none of your efforts are going to work as good as they possibly could be. So I think, at least for a short period of time, I think data can be very overwhelming to people. And then,
Yes.
that's why you work with a coach or you just like do what some people just do deep dives. Like there's a ton of blogs and podcasts where you can really understand your data. That's really the next big piece. It's like, oh, we have all these numbers. What do I do with it?
Mm.
And that's when we do the biohacking, run the experimentation, give ourselves time to sit with our data and understand it and try to put the pieces together, whether it's like through journaling or just, I have some clients that like make some crazy spreadsheets, like however your brain likes to interpret these things, do it. And then ideally we can get off of it.
So you mentioned in both of you at some point in that explanation mentioned alcohol and supplements. I want to get into alcohol a little bit because it is very prevalent in the fire service. And
Mm.
we all know how firefighters are, and it's alcohol is a mainstay in the fire service. Um what it kind of what is alcohol doing to your body other than making you happy once in a while, but then, making you feel like shit the next day? What is alcohol? Why is it making you feel like shit?
Yeah, the bad news is that it's a toxin. You can't really get around that. It's a toxin, especially a neurotoxin, and it's putting an increased burden, especially on our detoxification organs, so the liver. And I think for first responders that are already exposed to so many toxins, you're just making it harder for your body to detoxify these things. So it just slows everything down. Ideally, like our bodies detoxify well. It should be like a 1-to-1 ratio. You're exposed to something, your body detoxifies it. It comes out safely. But when the burden becomes higher and greater, and it's getting higher and greater for all of us because our world is so toxic. We have air pollution. We can have polluted air like inside our own homes. Actually, like homes are very toxic these days. And toxins can even come from like negative self-talk. That maybe sounds really woo to some people, but like our liver has to process that, like
Yeah.
anger, angst, like stress, or that has to go through the liver. So I think there's a lot against us. So I think with alcohol, you're just pouring fuel on the fire. It's inflammatory, it's slowing down our detoxification capacity. And it's great because it makes us feel good. It has like a slight numbing effect. It's jovial. It feels good. But as you said, you probably feel like shit tomorrow. And luckily, I think there's a lot of amazing alternatives. Like we now have kind of normalized this non alcoholic state change alternative where there's all kinds of herbs and nootropics and all things in the plant world that we could potentially pull in that still make us feel like that the burden has been lifted. We feel a little happier. It's, maybe, I don't know if you can use the word numbing, but, kind of a dissociative in that way that I think after a long 24-hour on the job kind of day, you deserve, right? Like you got to get out of that stress, fight or flight state, but we can do that without pouring fuel on the fire.
Yeah, I
Is
I would ask why are you drinking the alcohol? Lauren, you just mentioned a lot of state changes that you're going for. I think one big one is like the dopamine hit, right? We're all humans, we love that dopamine hit. But if that's what we're going for, can we go for a walk in nature? Can we do some breath work? Can we do something a little bit more natural to get a dopamine hit? And then the thing with alcohol is the more you drink, the more you need to get that same hit, which is
Yeah.
why it's so addictive. And if it is more the calming effect, where you had a really stressful day, just need to like turn my brain off and calm down. Yeah, can we use something like kava or CBD, all these natural plant compounds? And then the other thing is, do you like the taste? Is it the idea of coming home, pouring something in a glass, and sitting on the couch and sipping on it? There's something called hop water, which tastes almost like beer, but it's totally healthy, no alcohol in it. So I think find what you want. Is it the dopamine? Is it the taste? Is it the calming effect? And fortunately today we just have so many options. 5 years ago, we couldn't even, I don't think, had the same conversation that we can have
No.
today.
Mm-mm.
Not with options, definitely not.
Yeah.
It wasn't there. You could go to a bar and they had nothing non-alcoholic for you except for water or soda.
Yeah, the
Right.
mocktail lists are really flourishing. I'm
They
surprised.
are.
And I was kind of avoiding them for a long time because I'm like, oh, it's just going to be like a cup of sugar. But
Right.
they're getting better. People are like,
Yeah.
bartenders are getting more creative. They're using bitters and herbs and citrus where you're not getting a sugar hit and like a spike to your glucose, but you can actually feel like you're enjoying something.
And I think that for me, I'm trying a year without alcohol, and I don't know where to go from after that. But my last drink was at my nephew's wedding in June, and for me, it's something in my hand. I am or was a bourbon drinker, and I just like to have that feel, that tactile feel of something in my hand, and I'll read a book and have a drink. And I think that was the hardest thing to do without. It's like, all right, so what's there? Water just doesn't cut it. So it's finding something to
Yeah.
replace it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Or like Three Spirit. That's another good brand that kind of tastes like a cocktail. You can pour it over, in a rocks glass and enjoy it that way. And then you actually had a good point. You haven't had a drink since June. I tell people maybe go 7, 14, even 21 days
Hmm.
without alcohol and watch your sleep stats, watch your recovery stats, maybe even journal how you're feeling. And I would bet you're going to feel so much better that that might then motivate you to cut it out. And then if
Yeah,
you are
it's
going to drink, maybe it's one on an occasion. And then we can get into the whole discussion of which alcohols. Like beer is the absolute worst, right? We're looking
Yeah.
at mold, fermentation, carbs,
Yeah.
sugar, carbonation, gluten. Like that would be like the worst option versus the other end of the spectrum, like a tequila, vodka, gin, like a clear liquor. If you are going to drink, I'm saying there are better options available there.
You mentioned that you take that drink and you get that dopamine hit, happiness, but chemically, what's happening after that?
Well, then you actually go through a withdrawal. Yeah, even just one drink the next day, your body will go through a withdrawal. That could just show up as brain fog, headache, fatigue, because it's such an addictive substance.
And I think
Yeah,
I was gonna ask you, yeah, do you feel the remnants of that almost like a kind of like a depression afterwards?
yeah,
Like, you sink down lower, and then it takes you a while to come back up out of it after you've had a night of a couple of drinks.
yeah. And then the
Yeah.
next time, then you need more drinks. So, how many people listening have had said, "I'm going to go out and have one drink tonight." You have
Mm,
that one drink, you get that dopamine hit, and you're like, "I'll have a second one.
yeah,
Oh, now I want that dopamine hit again. I'll have a third one,"
yeah.
right? And then the night gets away, and you wake up the next day feeling terrible. And so, yeah, your body's just naturally kind of lowering that dopamine standard where you need more, you
Hmm.
need more.
Yeah. But it's also affecting your gut, your microbiome, your gut lining.
Yes.
It's definitely affecting your glucose. And this is something I see on CGMs all the time. There's this paradoxical effect where people drink alcohol and they say, oh, it doesn't spike my glucose because actually it's competing in your liver for food metabolism. So it keeps your glucose actually quite stable. But if you continue to look a few hours later, especially into night, you'll see this rise in glucose. So people are sleeping and they're thinking this whole time, like, oh, alcohol is good for me. What it does overnight is it can actually reverse your leptin and ghrelin levels. It elevates your glucose. So the next day, not only you're going to feel like shit because you're tired and hungover and toxic, but you're going to have more cravings. You're going to start choosing foods that are not as good as you want them to be. So it's really this cascade effect that is so beyond just like the typical hangover that we think of. And I know this is like age old advice and maybe it's oversimplified, but if you don't want to even explore giving up alcohol, just drink more water while you're
Mm.
drinking. Like maybe you have one less and have a drink of water in between. Like that will help your liver, that will help your sleep. Like incremental choices like that, just to take the burden off. Really, we're just trying to lift the burden just so you can get a little bit better considering your lifestyle preferences, because I love alcohol, like, I love a cocktail, I'm never gonna give it up completely, but I have biohacked a way to fit it into my life so it doesn't destroy my resilience, and that looks different for everybody, like, you have to essentially kinda pick your poison, know your boundaries, but I think if you are interested in these kind of state change alternatives, like non-alcoholic alternatives, we're happy to share some resources there. There's just, like, so much out that's on the market right now that's, like, pretty awesome, fascinating, and tasty, like, it's a good time to be, a non-drinker, I will say.
Hey guys, quick break right here just to check in and thank each of you for listening to the show. Your support has been paramount, and I appreciate all of you. I have one request, though. I need you to share the show with everyone you know. Help me get the word out and spread these stories as far and as wide as we can. While you're at it, please leave a review of the show wherever you happen to listen. Feel free to reach out to me at any time to share your story, to talk, or to pass on suggestions. Let's get on with the rest of the show. Oh, all right. So supplements. How much? This is going to be such a general question, and you're probably going to be, yeah, you might scream at me. How much of these are just pure bullshit?
A lot, a lot of
Yeah.
them.
Is there
Yeah.
anything out there that you would say that one's good? These are good. These are what we would suggest.
Yeah, I would say there's companies that we trust that have third-party testing that we know have rigorous methods for proving their efficacy, and we can stand behind their labels. Um, yeah, but supplements are really tricky because that's super bio-individual as well, which is why we like to look at lab testing to find out, like, do you really need this? I would say, like, there's, like, a general stack that most people need. Ideally, we get it from food, but our food supply has been diminished in quality and
Hmm.
nutrients, so you have to eat, like, so many more vegetables to get the nutrient value that we used to be able to get 50 years ago. So that's where supplements can really come in. Also, we're under a lot more stress, and stress robs us of our nutrients. So if you're someone
Mm.
that has a lot of stress in your life, for example, first responders, then we could replenish those nutrients through supplements. But we do want to make sure they're coming from third party tested companies that we know and trust. And then just coming back to the lab tests and understand, like, does your biochemistry really need this? Is there a deficiency? Is there an insufficiency? So on the labels, it'll have like the RDA recommended value. That's not what you need to be optimal. And we're always concerned with optimal. That's only going
Right.
to tell you what you need to not be deficient and be sick and ill, right? So a little bit of a loaded question, but I think there are ways we can personalize it. Looking at your diet, optimizing digestion, as Renee mentioned, like if you do those deep rests before you sit down and eat, you will actually get more nutrition out of your food. So that's a simple way to need less supplements is just to like slow down and breathe and be in a calm state and digest well. And yeah, looking at the lab tests, I'll let Renee jump in.
Yeah, I think finding a brand that you can trust. We use a lot of physician formulated companies. Like I wouldn't just go to GNC or the vitamin shop and just grab things off the shelf because I mean
Mm,
they have done a lot of studies where they go and they pull things off the shelf and they test them and it's not what it says it is. So
Right.
for sure there are junk supplements on the market because there's just not enough regulations right now. So if you are going to spend the money, make sure it's the good quality. And yeah, I mean, the basics, maybe just like a really good multivitamin, a fish oil that's really clean and not rancid. There's definitely some basic things. And then one that we like to talk about with firefighters is modified citrus pectin. I always like to bring this in just because you are exposed to so many toxins at work. This is a really good one. There's a lot of great research on how it binds to toxins in the body. I think if there's anything else specific, potentially NAD, it's a little bit pricier, but there's some new supplements coming out on the market making it easier to just take a capsule at home so you're not spending $1,000 on an NAD IV. But that's a really good one for overall burden of toxins because I always think of like this rain barrel effect. How full is your rain barrel before it spills over? And Lauren, you had said this a little bit earlier. It's like, okay, so you're exposed to, smoke or whatever toxins at work. Okay. Then you go home, you're exposed to more VOCs in your brand new house or whatever. And then you have that cocktail, more alcohol, right? And then it spills over and then that's when we get sick. So it's like, how can we keep that rain barrel as low as possible and then support it through things like I said, like NAD, modified citrus pectin, a healthy diet, things like that.
It's funny
mhm.
you mentioned citrus pectin because I saw that on your Instagram and I put it on the list. I hadn't even heard of it, to be honest with you. I had no idea what it is, and so I was gonna pick your brains about that a little bit. Since you mentioned it already, let's get into it a little bit. What is it? How does it affect these toxins? How does it take them out or remove them? I'm completely ignorant to what it does.
Yeah, so it falls in a class of binders, as we call them. I like to think this is like our cellular housekeeper. It goes in and essentially like sweeps up the toxins and the trash, and it will safely escort them out. So it's going to put them in the trash bag and it's going to take the trash bag out into the trash can. Whereas if we just have these toxins from alcohol, from smoke, from anything else that we're exposed to, and we just leave them kind of free to roam the body, they're going to keep burdening the body. But we also don't want to just like clean house and eject them not in a safe way. So something like citrus pectin is a selective binder where it's going to go in and seek out those toxins, but not at the same time pull out all of your nutrients and helpful like beneficial microbes, vitamins, what else you're putting in your body through supplementation. It's very selective.
Kind
So
of
we
like a
could
baby
take a
with the
bind.
bathwater type thing.
Yeah, we don't want to just like sweep everything like you're all of you get out of here.
Right.
We want to make sure we're selectively choosing the things that could be harmful to your body, and that's what citrus pectin does. It's selective.
And how do is it a just a capsule form or what is it?
Yeah, it comes in capsule
Typically,
form, powder form. There's even some tablets. I really like this company that makes this product called Pectasol. They specialize in modified citrus pectin. So, if you go to their website, you can also look at a lot of research on what they're doing with that. But I kind of like the tablets for people that are like traveling a lot. It's just easy to like pop one in, let it dissolve in your mouth.
Mhm.
But Yeah,
It
different
actually
options.
tastes
I don't
pretty
know.
good too.
And it tastes pretty good, citrusy.
Okay.
I don't know why it hasn't gotten the fame that it deserves. Maybe it will in the next couple of years, but yeah.
I'm kinda glad. I like when supplements don't get the fame they deserve because that means that other companies are not gonna try to take advantage of this
Yes.
market and make money off of a cheap product. Like, right now, it seems like only the companies we really trust are making it. Like, let's leave it that way. Like,
Good
when
point.
people realized that people needed more magnesium, suddenly everyone was making magnesium. Are we taking the right form of magnesium? Like, where did that come from? Do we
Yeah.
really need it? Are you wasting your money? So I kinda like these, these
Hush, hush.
star key players that are
Yeah.
hiding in the corner. I would say zinc is another one like that.
Oh, yeah.
We also could lean into nutrients that are really helpful for stress if we're going to lean into that component, right? Nervous system dysregulation, maybe the vagus nerve needs some support. Our body, the fuel that our body runs through very quickly when stressed are B vitamins, magnesium, and zinc. So that's a great one to test on blood chemistry, but we often can get that through a good quality multivitamin, like Renee said. But I would just assume, based on the lifestyle and the job responsibilities, that there is an increased burden of stress. So most likely running through those minerals too. Our body, that's like definitely fuel that just gets burned so quickly. Um, so minerals, a good quality multivitamin, specifically with B's, zinc, magnesium, and then something like a citrus pectin, which can bind to the toxins and get them out safely.
And you mentioned NAD. Now, I have questions about NAD because I know it can be pricey for the IVs. And when I first started hearing about NAD, I knew that I heard or I read that there was some question about the availability of it in your body when you used it in the pill form. Has that improved? And is there something out there that you can actually benefit from with NAD without using the IV?
Yes, definitely. A lot has changed in the NAD space. So, when the research was first coming out showing that NAD was helpful for, I mean, cellular repair, cellular cleanup, cellular energy, all of these things, people thought, oh, let's just put NAD in a capsule and we'll swallow it and
Yeah.
yay, we're done. You're right. It doesn't work that way. So then they discovered, okay, well, what if we use the precursors like NMN and NR? That does seem to work. So a lot of the supplements out there now, they might say NAD on the front, but if you turn it over, it's actually NMN and NR or one or the other. And even further research, I'm going to say Dr. Nicola Condon, I think is how you say her name. She is this amazing scientist from Ireland. She is studying NAD full time, and she's actually taken the even deeper dive on how to increase NAD, and she's able to put it into a capsule. So I think that's really interesting research. But the IVs, they're just not. I don't think they're worth it. They're
Okay.
so expensive. They're time consuming. You have to do them often. I mean, most people aren't going to do a $700 4-hour IV every week.
No.
That's not going to happen. So it is exciting to see there are products coming out that are something that you can just have on your countertop and take once a day. And her product specifically, actually, she's doing a lot of research using True Diagnostics biological age testing. And she found within 4 weeks of supplementing that, they were able to actually reverse people's biological age by over 1 year.
Hmm.
Um,
It's
do I need to
impressive.
explain biological age, or do you feel like that's
I think that maybe we'll touch on what NAD is and
okay?
biological age because I'm not sure that it's one of those things that people might not have heard of before.
Yeah. So on the biological age side of things, so we have our chronological age, which is based off of our birth date on our driver's license, right? Biological age is actually looking at how fast you're aging. So ideally, we want our biological age to be less than our chronological age. And there's a lot of great testing out there for that too. Like I said, I think True Diagnostic is probably the best one. But this is a great way to see if all the things that you're doing are actually slowing the aging process. We're not going to stop the aging, but if we can slow it, that's the goal. And so you can use the test to see, is my diet, exercise, sleep, stress, all of this making a difference? Is the NAD supplement making a difference? And then back to NAD. So NAD levels naturally decline after the age of 40. And once our NAD is gone, we are gone. So we want to keep NAD up as long as we can. Like I said, it's really working at the cellular level. So if we can optimize cellular health, then we see, this cascade of better organ health, better system health, better whole body health, right? It all starts with the cells. And NAD is what fuels the cell. So we can also increase NAD in the body through high intensity interval training, strength training, fasting. So there are some somewhat free ways we can increase NAD in the body, but if you wanted to supplement, yeah, I think there's some good options there.
Yeah, I think the lifestyle options are really important because if you're going, "Oh my gosh, these IVs are so expensive." Like a lot of time we jump to what can I spend money on to support this in the body, but oftentimes it's like what do we need to avoid, eliminate, or what are just like some foundational lifestyle things we can do to support our body's natural healing abilities. Like that's what we love the most. Our body can heal if we put it in the right environment and give it the right substrate or compounds. And a big part of that is like eliminating the things that could be decreasing our capacity to produce NAD, which is essentially like our energy. Like, how do we transfer energy within the body? So, like Renee said, like exercise, heat can do that, fasting can do that. So, before you spend a lot of money on it, it's like look at your lifestyle things. What can you make slight adjustments and edits to just help the body naturally do it?
I first heard about it, and I'm trying to remember where I heard about it. It was on a show, probably 4 years ago. I first heard about NAD supplements or NAD infusions, and I was like, "Okay, great," 'cause, I started firefighting I was older. I was 44 when I started firefighting, so I'm 54 now, and it's one of those things like, "Well, how do I hack that?" How do I stay competitive with 25-year-old firefighters, and it's not easy. And so I look for some of those things, but I'm also trying to just lay the groundwork at start at that basal level with nutrition and sleep and cutting out things like alcohol and shitty food. But I,
Mhm.
I I tried NAD for a while, and I was like, well, then I saw the research. I was like, well, it's pointless. And then it kind of went away from my vernacular until recently I started seeing it. It might be more available now. So it was interesting. I wanted to ask though specifically about that a little bit.
Yeah, there's some cool ways to get it. And I think there's a lot of debate on do we need to do the precursors, which ones? But I would say like do a biological age test and let's also line it up with your blood chemistry and see like how well is your body keeping up? Maybe you don't need it. Maybe you need a little
Right.
bit. I don't know. It's like let's get some answers from your physiology before we just spend a lot of money on this thing that we've heard in the research and everyone's talking about, you know?
Yeah.
So everybody's
And
wondering, all right, when,
alcohol.
oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry. I was just gonna say alcohol actually depletes NAD.
Yeah.
So if you're going out and drinking and then spending $100 on your NAD supplement, like
That doesn't make much sense.
Could save a lot of money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and everybody's kind of wondering when we're going to get to actual hacking, and we've talked about it all along. That was, I kind of had this idea where like we set this framework, and then we get into these biohacks, but it's biohacks all the way.
All the way.
And
All
and
the way.
so that, I
Yeah.
like this. So, we touched quite a bit on CGM. So I think we've kind of discussed that enough. Let's talk about sauna some. And what are you guys seeing? What are the benefits of sauna? And are you preaching infrared? Are you preaching the typical sauna, or what is it you support?
Hmm. I think any sauna that you can get access to is better than nothing. Absolutely. I think
Mhm.
there's, a lot of benefits to a dry, like traditional Finnish sauna. What I like about the infrared is that we get the light component, we get the color spectrum and frequencies. And also we can allow the heat to penetrate deeper without overheating. I know when I go in a dry sauna, I'm like, "Ah, I can't breathe in here. Where in the infrared sauna, I can actually jack the heat up much higher and get that cellular stress, and it's good stress. We want that cellular hormetic stress and reap the benefits at a higher temperature without like suffocating. Is how I feel sometimes in a dry sauna. So, I would probably pull for infrared, but I think just sweating in general is just so hugely important. Like the skin as a way to detoxify and endless benefits there. I mean, it improves cardiovascular function, endothelial function, can reduce blood pressure. We're mobilizing toxins out of the body. Can be great for glucose. That list like goes on and on. What else would you put in that category, Renee? The benefits.
Yeah, I will to add to the detox. So actually with infrared saunas, if you can get a full spectrum, I think that's ideal. So you're getting near, mid, and far infrared. There's different benefits for each one. But with the sweating in an infrared sauna, when they test the sweat in studies, they actually find heavy metals, lead, arsenic, mercury. So that's pretty wild that you're sweating it out. And I don't know, I know Lauren, you mentioned like the dry sauna. I can lay in the dry sauna and just be miserable and not break a sweat. I just lay in there. I'm like, is the sweat ever going to come? It doesn't. For the infrared sauna in 10 minutes, I'm like, whoo, it's like releasing. So for me, I just feel better with that, but also cardiovascular benefits. So we kind of call the sauna like almost like a parasympathetic workout. So you're sitting there, right? Not like moving around, and you're getting the similar cardiovascular benefits that you would get from a cardio workout. Also, immune function. So we see with the release of heat shock proteins, this is a great boost for the immune system. Another thing that, first responders definitely need. And then also just the resilience to heat. So there we can also talk about the benefits of cold, but I think putting your body through these hormetic stressors of heat and cold, it makes your body more resilient to be able to go to work and, do the things you have to do or just to be alive on this planet. So many Americans are just in their, 72-degree house, and then they go sit in their car and it's all temperature
Yeah.
controlled, and then they complain about, oh, the weather's so hot or the weather's so cold. It's like, yeah, because you don't have any resilience to that change in temperature. If you think about our ancestors, they survived in all kinds of weather naturally. They just had that resilience built into them. But today we
Mhm.
need to actually like practice that to build it.
Yeah, comfort is definitely killing us slowly. And I have a friend that is always comfortable, just seeks comfort. And we went to Austin where it's just insanely hot. She never goes in the heat. She got heat stroke from one day in the heat. It's like, well, of course, you haven't conditioned your body to be here. And so it's not
Right.
just like, how do I not get ill, but how do I use this as a stressor to like train my nervous system? And Renee said, train my resilience so that it's not so shocking and stressful on the body if and when you accidentally are put in that environment.
So the opposite of that is cold.
Yeah,
Yeah.
kind of
So
same thing.
what is the cold plunge bringing out for us?
I think cold is definitely more uncomfortable for most people. I would
Yeah.
say, like, if I were to
Yeah.
take a poll, like, more people are gonna choose the sauna over the cold plunge,
Yeah,
right?
any day.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
of
it's a
course.
much more condensed stressor, right? Like, you don't need
Yeah,
to be in the cold plunge for more than 3 minutes, where the duration in sauna is much longer. So, of course,
yeah.
it's gonna take longer to build up that, like, "I hate this and I wanna get out," feelings in your body. But cold is the same. It's the perfect environment to train and condition your body to handle stress. Like, if you can get into cold, which is
Mm.
I don't know what to say if it's unnatural. I mean, we don't want to be cold and shivering and uncomfortable all the time, but if you can get there and control your breath and tell your body that you're safe, you're training your nervous system to be able to respond for those moments where you're in a place or an environment that you can't control. So I would say that even more than sauna, that's a great place to train nervous system resilience, practicing your breath, telling your body you're safe. And then we get this flood of benefits after, same as heat. It kind of turns on the body to be able to enact those natural healing abilities. Um, you can read about a lot of benefits like activating brown fat, which is great for your metabolism. It really helps to dispose of extra glucose in your body. Uh, Even amazing things for people that don't tolerate cold. Like if you have Raynaud's or seeing incredible things where you actually expose yourself to cold, you can, I don't want to use the word heal, but potentially make that a much better experience for you where the Raynaud's is not as severe anymore. Um, so again, yeah, it's like short bouts of discomfort actually kick in these natural healing abilities of the body. And we have greater immune system, greater resilience. Our stress tolerance becomes so much higher. And with cold, it only takes a couple minutes of being, insanely miserable.
So the way I understand it, and this is a very rudimentary understanding, the cold plunge, does the benefit come from the fact that you sink yourself into this water or this ice and, the blood pulls away from your extremities, correct? It's going to protect your vital organs, is
Hmm.
my understanding, and that's what
Hmm.
we do if we find ourselves submerged in cold water in a lake or something, same thing. It goes to protect these vital organs. You get out and you start this slow warming process, and the blood flows back into the extremities, and now it's this is it oxygen or nutrient-rich blood that's coming back to the extremities? Is that where the healing is coming from, or am I misunderstanding that?
That is part of the healing ability. Part of it is training the nervous system to not panic when something is uncomfortable. But then there is this whole physiological response where we get increased circulation, like blood delivery of nutrients. redistributing the blood to rewarm the organs. And like the worst news people don't want to hear, but it's the truth. You don't want to falsely warm your body up. You want to allow your body to go through that process. So if you're doing like a hot, cold alternating therapy, you don't want to go back in the sauna as good as that sounds and feels.
Yeah.
You do want to like be in the cold and let your body naturally get you back to that normal state.
So, so you jump out of the cold plunge and you put on a pair of sweatpants, a hoodie, and some socks. Is that too warm?
Probably not. I'm thinking more like don't go right in the sauna. Don't like plop yourself in front of a fire.
Okay.
Hot tub.
um, a hot tub. Yeah, like let your body naturally warm up. Something also that you could do is after cold is do a strength training workout because of that increased circulation. Once you get out to all of your muscles and your periphery, we're seeing like increased strength potential in workouts.
Okay.
And actually, I've tested this myself. We have this really cool machine called the ARX, which has metrics for strength. So you can see exactly how you're pushing eccentrically, concentrically. You can see your volume. And whenever I do cold prior to that, my stats are just through the roof. So really interesting way to stack your exercise and your hormetic stressors together. I wouldn't do that before endurance work. You do want the body to be like fairly warm before you do cycling or running.
And I know we talked about it a little bit beginning before we started recording. I had a very personal question to ask you about the cold plunge. I I destroyed my ankle way back when. I won't even admit to how long ago it was. I had a couple dislocations and numerous fractures in my right ankle, and I had an internal fixation done on it. It is pretty much just frozen in place. I have very little movement on it. I have no side to side. I just have a little bit of up and down. Um, but I noticed some increased pain in there, and I'm wondering, does it have an effect on old injuries, which is more negative than positive? Is there any research to that that you know of?
Are you asking would it be harmful to use cold at this point?
Well, not, yeah, harmful, or is yeah? I guess I am asking that. Yes.
I think if you're going for like a full body immersion, like I wouldn't leave that body part out. I don't think it's actually going to do harm, but I think if it's an old injury, probably chances of the cold being the modality that helps your ankle are probably less likely. When there's so
Mhm.
many things that happen, like so many adaptive processes that the body goes under to keep you safe after an injury. And actually, a huge part of that is the nervous system. If you've told your body or you told your ankle it's not safe to move laterally, it's gonna keep you frozen in time because it doesn't want you to get injured again. And so I think we would have to address the nervous system component, and there's ways to do that, like, there are devices we could use. It could just be like a meditation where you're sitting with your ankle and telling it, like, "This is okay, you are safe, you are free to move." You have to do some mobilization techniques. Maybe even go in the sauna and get it warm and then do the mobility stuff. So I don't think that the cold is harmful. I just don't know, like, once, like, those tissues have kind of adapted and your nervous system has adapted, uh, I don't know. I wouldn't avoid it, but I don't think that's the thing that's gonna take you to the next step in healing.
So I guess as long as I don't think I'm doing damage to it, and that's kind of the question I
Yeah.
had. And this is a very selfish question. I'm using my own platform to answer the question for myself, and nobody else
Oh,
really
we
cares
do it.
about it.
We do it
So
all the time.
That's what podcasts are
What's
for.
why we have a podcast.
yeah. So it's also why you biohack, right? So
Yeah.
you solve
Yeah.
very personal problems. All right.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to think of where to go with cold plunge. I know it's a very short window. Is there a temperature it needs to be at or under? And you said time you can do a very short window of like 3 minutes. And what would be the ideal setting for a cold plunge?
Well, there's so many ways you could do it. I like the full immersion because that's where you get like the emotional nervous system benefits. Like a cold shower is not going to take you into that place of like, am I safe? Am I not? Am I panicking? Um, there's a lot of research out there, and I think I don't even fully understand it. But my understanding is that even something as short as 30 seconds in a cold shower can produce benefits. But I think it really depends on like where is your edge? Where do
Hmm.
you start tipping towards discomfort? We kind of want to find that sweet spot between like completely stressing out the body and being too comfortable. So I would say to find your edge, whether that's in a cold shower or the full plunge, which I think for a first responder, where it would be really beneficial to train the nervous system to be like cool as a cucumber in these conditions. That would be awesome. Um, Other ways to do it. Here, you just put ice in your bathtub if you want to. If
Yeah.
that's your jam. But I think probably more benefits from the full immersion. What would you say, Renee?
Yeah, yeah, I would agree. And Lauren, you would probably know the answer. What about temperature? Like I know sometimes you're in 50 degrees, which is pretty easy for you. Sometimes you do 35. Is that again a personal thing of where your spot is?
Yeah, I think again, it's like, where is your edge? Like for some people, the idea of 50 is like, oh, hell no.
That's
Mhm.
Some
me.
people just have a higher tolerance, but I know some like cold experts out there that are like 33 degrees or bust. Like you're wasting your time if you don't. But I like if it's adding a slight stress to your body, and then it's like we have to address how much stress is your body already dealing with, right? This is a stressor. It's a hormetic
Mhm.
stressor, so used acutely and strategically it can create eustress, positive stress in the body. But, if you're a female that is autoimmune, has thyroid issues, and you're responsible for your 5 kids and your husband and full-time job, like your whole day is just stress, probably not a good idea to add more stress in that sense. Um, so we're always like more concerned with minimum effective dose. Like, what is the least amount of hormetic stress you can do for the biggest rebound effect? So, and that's really a personal question. So, if you're going to get in the ice, get in the plunge, ask yourself, like, trust your intuition, let your own body tell you when it's enough. And maybe like more for the male population, but don't try to outperform the guy before you, right? It's not a contest on
Yeah.
time and duration. It's like, what is your body really asking for in that moment? And listen to it.
It's funny you say that. It's I wonder if you were watching us at the firehouse because we did it as a crew, and of course, the first guy sets the standard, and everybody wants to go, "Oh, I did 2 seconds more than you, so whatever."
Yeah.
Uh,
I'm not gonna say anything, but I did go longer, and it's always
it's a
that way.
hard
So
thing. That's a hard
oh, yeah.
thing. Yeah. The
Yeah.
challenge is to like do you always in
Yeah.
anything, right? It's
Oh,
like,
yeah,
how do
definitely.
we not care what anyone else did or think?
Right. Sounds good to say you don't care, but that's not
Yeah.
true. Everybody
No,
cares.
totally.
So
We're
Totally.
all competitive.
on this list of firefighter hacks from a post, one of your posts on Instagram, and you had cold thermo, and I'm assuming that was cold plunge, or am I mistaken there?
Yeah, cold thermogenesis. Yeah.
Okay. The next one is exogenous, and I mispronounced that because I can't speak English today. Ketones. Where's the benefit there? What is it doing for us?
Exogenous, which means
Exogenous.
outside of
Thank
the
you.
body, something we're
And I
pulling
I
into the
know how to
body.
pronounce the word, by the way. It's just it
It's a
got me.
lot of letters and X's
Yeah.
are weird. Yeah, it's exogenous versus endogenous, something your body naturally produces.
Right.
You want to share about ketones, Renee?
Yeah, I mean, ketones, this kind of goes back to of what we were talking about with like metabolic health and maybe using the continuous glucose monitor. So, we want to be metabolically fit, especially when you're under a lot of stress. With your shifts, you want to be able to tap in and say, hey, I need to burn carbs for fuel, or hey, I need to burn fat for fuel. And that's where fasting can be really beneficial, right? It's teaching your body how to burn fat for fuel. And most Americans today, their body doesn't even know how to tap into the fat reserves. It's just like, carbs, glucose, every 2 hours, give me this fuel. But through fasting, we can, like I said, train that. Because if you're out and you're working, I don't know what your shifts are typically like, but if you're out for 4 or 5 hours and you don't have access to food, you need to be able to burn that fat for fuel. Otherwise, you're going to get brain fog, you're going to be lethargic, you're going to get tired. Not ideal in that work environment. So, number one is how do we train the body to burn fat for fuel? Then that's when we get endogenous ketones, and that's what's going to fuel your body. But exogenous ketones is a fancy supplement where we can add ketones to the body to get somewhat of the same benefit of using the ketones for fuel without forcing your body to be in like a fasted state or on a ketogenic diet. So, you can take it in powder form, capsule form, something like that. And it allows you to actually like extend maybe like a fast or a long work shift where you don't have food, something like that.
It's also great for helping your body to dispose of glucose, like put the glucose where it needs. It takes it out of the bloodstream, which we don't want too much glucose in our bloodstream. It's very damaging
Mm.
to our vessels and our cells. So ketones can be really helpful if you're struggling with glucose metabolism. Also, since we talked about alcohol, like non-alcoholic alternatives, there's a lot of ketone drinks that would be great as like a state change alternative. There's one company in particular called hard ketones. And they've like reformulated a few times because ketones themselves don't taste that great. So it's like when you tell someone like just take the ketones, it's like, oh, we're not gonna be compliant here because it just doesn't taste good. But they've reformulated, and right now they have some amazing drinks that could be replacements for a cocktail or a beer, especially in the evening. It's going to keep your glucose really steady, which we want going into sleep. And sometimes we have like this kind of like euphoric benefit from drinking ketones. So they're delicious. There's like a pina colada, a ginger mule. I'm like,
Hmm.
it's nice, nice alternative.
And that slides right into fasting, and that's probably related right there to exogenous ketones, correct? And you said earlier in the show, I think both of you have mentioned it early in the show that you find a feeding window. And
Mhm.
again, we're gonna go back to that's probably a very personal thing, correct?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
But I think across the board, I say like bare minimum, everyone needs to, I would quote unquote fast for 12 hours a day. Pick at a minimum
Including
12
your sleep
hours.
in there, correct?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
is
So
that
hopefully,
outside of sleep? Okay.
yeah. So
Yeah,
hopefully you're
'cause alright.
sleeping, 8 of those hours. So that should be pretty easy. And um, I remember there was a meme on Instagram. It said, oh, the easiest way to fast 12 hours is to just sleep 12 hours. So yeah, there
It's a
you go.
great strategy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, so I would just say 12 hours of just not putting food in your mouth. And then from there, that's where you decide, is it a 14-hour fast, 16-hour fast? Men definitely typically do better with fasting than women of reproductive age. Women in menopause, some of them can fast a little bit better. But yeah, it is a very personal thing. And for women, going back to that, if you're cycling, there's certain times of the month that you can fast longer than others. Versus
Okay.
men, you can pretty much do the same thing day after day. For my male clients, I find like a 24-hour fast every week or every 2 weeks can be like a really good way to boost, cellular cleansing, autophagy, things like that. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's super personal.
My advice would be to keep the fasting variable. We don't want to do the same thing every day. Like the body responds to changing environments and variables. That's why we do the hormetic stressors like the hot or the cold. And so a lot of people have jumped on this intermittent fasting bandwagon where they're eating the same every single day. And a common pitfall of the intermittent fasting is that people are pushing their first meal back so late in the day that then their hunger just can't catch up. So I find actually a lot with male clients, they finally get home at the end of a workday and they're like ravenous. I just have to eat
Yeah.
everything. And then they're eating until they go to bed. Well, right now, especially with the days getting short, like it's dark by 5 p.m., which I'm like, this happens every year and I still don't understand. But your glucose is not going to respond as well. Like once the sun goes down, your insulin, which is the hormone that helps respond and really dictates your glucose metabolism, it goes to bed. When the sun goes down, your insulin's gone. And so if you're eating most of your calories in that window of time after the sun goes down, you're going to create a metabolic problem. So I would say with the intermittent fasting, you can do it, but don't push everything later in the day. We want to keep it like earlier in the day when the sun is high in the sky, and that's when you're having the most metabolic power. So that's just like caution. Don't jump on the intermittent fasting bandwagon without considering like where are we getting the bulk of our calories in the day?
Yeah, that's interesting because I always thought of it as intermittent fasting is, "Okay, well, I won't eat till lunch." And so there's my fast where I could flip that, eat at 6 in the morning till, I don't know, 4 in the afternoon, and then fast till 6 in the morning.
Yeah, Renee and I talk about this a lot. It's like, why are we not considering skipping dinner? People are always just
Right.
like, breakfast. Who need breakfast? But yeah, actually, it'd be better to start earlier in the day. I would say a reason to not do that is most people like to have dinner with their family. If you have a
Yes.
family, that tends to be a very social, communal time.
Mhm.
And I think for kids, it's very important to show them like mom and dad are eating dinner too, right? We're not fasting. Um, but I think there's ways around that. Still, you can put the bulk of your calories, make sure you're getting adequate protein earlier in the day, and you can still eat, but you don't want to just like be ravenous at night and have that carry
Right.
on through the evening. Yeah.
What about breath work?
Most of us are not breathing optimally and not enough. Breath work is the like most simple way to change your nervous system state. So to go from sympathetic into parasympathetic, as Renee mentioned, like before you eat, but we can do this just like cold or heat, like train our bodies to respond better to stress by practicing our breath. And so that looks different for a lot of people. It could be listening to a guided breathwork session, or you could just sit quietly, like find small intervals throughout your day where you just put maybe hand on your chest, hand on your belly. You want like 360 full breathing. I would say like two-thirds into the belly, one-third into the chest. A lot of us are just chest breathing. And that keeps us in a sympathetic state because it's going to activate like all of these muscles up in like intercostals, your scalenes, your TCM, keeps us in that fight or flight. So we want to make sure that we can really drop and do deep, full. The exhalation, particularly, is really helpful. But, you know, before spending a lot of money on supplements and fancy devices, like you always have your breath. The trick is like remembering to do it. So, for some clients, I have them like do little sticky notepads or put an alarm on the phone or have an accountability partner that just puts a hand on your shoulder and says, "Hey, let's just breathe." Starting a family ritual, sitting down to dinner, we're all just gonna like express some gratitude
Hmm.
and take a few breaths before we just, chow down. I think there's a lot of little windows. Um, but yeah, I mean, breathing is how we bring oxygen into our body. And so a lot of us are like missing out on a huge opportunity just to fuel our brains and our metabolism.
It's I my son was asking me one time about breathing, and he asked me we were watching the Tour de France, and he asked me why their bellies look so big, and I was like, "Well, that's they're breathing," and it's a
Yeah.
perfect example of belly breathing because here's these guys who weigh 110, pounds, and they're filling their bellies with air, and you realize at that point that's the way you're supposed to be breathing.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah,
We've had to work
Jana.
on that quite a lot. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. I mean, as ballet dancers, we're totally guilty of breathing incorrectly. But Jana
Mhm.
Danielson, I heard her say once, it's like we have gills on our neck now. Humans are breathing like fish. Like we're breathing from here and from our chest. Like we have gills.
Hmm.
But yeah, we need to be bringing it down. So I think number one is learning how to breathe. And maybe
Right.
it's a breathwork course or an app just to actually learn how to do it. And
Hmm.
then it's also, like Lauren said, a great tool for the nervous system. And so I had mentioned before we hit record, HRV biofeedback. Um,
Yes.
that maybe for some people sounds like a fancy thing, but it's breathing to optimize your heart rate variability. That's how simple it is. And so fortunately today we have technology that can guide a breathwork session based off of your personal HRV. And so just by tuning in, maybe it's box breathing, right? In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4, hold for
Mhm.
4. Maybe it's in for 4, out for 8, really simple things like that. But that is the quickest way to increase your HRV, which a lot of biohackers are always asking, how do I increase my
Mm.
HRV? So,
Hmm.
in short term, breath work is the best way to do it. Long term, also breath work if you are consistent with it. So, we all have stress throughout the day, right? That's not going to go away. We can only eliminate so much stress. But how quickly can you bounce back from that stress? So, say someone cuts you off in traffic. Oh gosh, okay. I'm over it 2 seconds later. That means you're a resilient human being. Your nervous system is responding the way it should. If someone cuts you off and you're up in arms for the next hour and you can't catch your breath, that
Right.
is an unhealthy nervous system and unhealthy reaction. So long term, doing something like our HRV biofeedback will create that. Here we go again. That word resiliency. And so there's a lot of different apps coming out there. Like I'm personally right now loving the Moonbird. It's a really simple thing. You can keep in your purse. You can do it in bed before you're falling asleep. But it's measuring your heart rate and your heart rate variability, and then telling you how to breathe with it. So it
Hmm.
is a personalized breath work.
Yeah. It's almost gamifying, right? We're
Yeah,
pulling in this data, these stats, because for a lot of people, breath work just seems either too woo or inaccessible or boring, or people, we tell ourselves we're not good at it. But when you have an app in front of you telling you, oh my gosh, my HRV is changing, and I just took a deeper breath, oh my God, it's getting better. Like you start getting addicted to that better, right? And
yeah,
people
like a
really
video
like that.
game.
You wanna see progress, because if you're not gamifying it, if you're not looking at the data, you're like, "Oh, I hope this is helping me. I don't know." And the chances of you being compliant with that practice really go down. So that's an opportunity to pull in, a metric like that or a wearable and have the data, like we spoke about earlier with the Garmin or the Aura Ring or the CGM. Maybe you only use it short term to see how it's actually affecting you, figure out when are the biggest opportunities. Like it's wild what you can see with these real-time feedback. Like on a podcast, I always notice my HRV drops down because when you're talking, you're on, like HRV is going to go down. Is that bad? No, but I need to remember for myself that I have to give myself recovery time on the back end. So you start to notice these tiny little opportunities. And then, like you said, it's like, oh, now I know how I feel when I'm going to remember to do that. I'm going to remember to breathe a little bit more during my day.
So for people listening, HRV is heart rate variability, correct?
Mhm.
And what are we looking for, and what does that mean?
So heart rate variability is a metric that is looking at the difference between the successive heartbeats. And so there's different windows between. And essentially we want a higher HRV, though we're not always aiming. The honest truth about HRV is there's not a normative baseline. It's not something like we can see on a lab test where we know like your cholesterol at this number is good or HRV is quite personalized, and there seems to be kind of an area in which your body will kind of oscillate. But in general, for your patterns and trends, we want to aim a little bit higher because higher HRV generally means higher resilience. So we want that number to go higher, and we do see it go higher with the breath work or any down regulation practice. Yeah.
And again, I'm flying kind of ignorant here. The heart rate variability is the time between, or the how long it takes between. Explain that a little bit more to me, please.
Yeah, so your heart's beating. You can measure your heart rate, which is, if you watch a clock for 60 seconds, you can see your average
Mm,
pace for a whole minute. The HRV is measuring like every window between the heartbeats, which is going to change constantly, right? Like sometimes the heart
okay,
beats a little faster, sometimes it's slower. And so it's pulling in metrics and measuring each window of time, and it's taking that average.
right,
So the
okay,
metric that we're looking at is in milliseconds. It's actually, if you it's quite dizzying, honestly, which is why we rely on these data wearables to just simplify
right.
it into one number for us. But it's measuring the successive difference because your heart rate is always changing.
And does that correlates with pulse? Your rhythm is correct.
It does, but you would need an HRV wearable. It's not something that you can calculate on your own based on your heart rate. Is that what you're asking?
Well, yeah, but I'm saying is like for someone whose resting heart rate is 60, their HRV might be lower, where someone whose resting heart rate is 42, that HRV is going to be higher, correct?
It doesn't correlate quite like that.
Okay,
It's the
that's what I was asking.
adaptability.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's the adaptability of the heart rate. It's like, how can we adapt to different environments and stressors? So we should be able to be resilient, right? That's kind of the theme of this conversation. Resilient. So when we're under stress, it's going to, beat really fast and it can come back down. It's the recovery. So we want that
Mm,
flexibility. That's the
okay.
variability piece. It's can we respond to the changing environment and be variable? Variable is a good thing.
Okay. So that's that recovery after tension.
Say that again.
It's kind of the recovery after a tension, after something's been your heart rate is elevated and you're bringing it down. That's the variability. You want that number to be higher, and that's showing the better recovery, correct?
Yeah, we don't want it to be the same all the time.
Okay.
Yeah. We
We
can
wanna
actually
be able
see,
to change.
yeah, when they're looking at HRV, when it's almost like a steady pace, like a monotone, not a lot of variation, we can actually see an increased risk for a heart attack. Sometimes they
Okay.
can actually predict that. So if an HRV is really, really like not variable, then we can actually see that risk. Um, yeah. And then overall, higher HRV is linked with less stress, less anxiety, less depression, less mood disorders overall, and less insomnia. Yeah. So,
For
I
some
suppose we could
reason,
liken it to, like, flexibility or mobility, like, if you're not very flexible and then all of a sudden you gotta, like, reach for something, you're like, "Oh, I pulled a muscle," right? We're training our body to be able to go a little bit higher, go a little bit lower, and respond.
I was gonna say, for some reason, it kinda just clicks in my head. So it's more about the adaptability.
Yes.
All right.
yeah,
Yes.
that's a
Perfect.
good word for
Now
it.
now now for some I'm a little slow sometimes, so bear with me.
No.
Oh,
It's
we've
No,
been
that
researching HRV forever, and I'm like,
right.
it's taken a long time to understand it. It's a very, very complex metric.
All right, so I think the last thing we have on the list is probably the third rail in some areas, and we're going to talk plant medicine a little bit. And anybody that's followed me from Instagram or the podcast will tell you that I preach plant medicine because I think it's the future for a number of things. I think that we can create some recovery both emotionally and physically through plant medicine. Excuse me. And so where what are we talking about when we say plant medicine?
Well, it's a big world of plants. There's a lot of
Yes.
different substances that people are using in, health optimization protocols and journeys. I mean, there's a million different applications, so we want to be selective in which compound we're working with because they all do different things. I primarily work with psilocybin, which is mushrooms. But between Renee and I, we've experienced different compounds for different effects. And Renee can share. We both have had like some pretty profound experiences that were quite life changing. Reasons to use plant medicine. I guess how much does your audience already know about
You know
pulling it
what?
in?
I'm not sure how much they know. I have a pretty good background in I've read the periphery of everything and I know the mechanics behind it. I don't know what my audience would know, to be honest with you. I've not discussed it too much on the show. They've heard me mention it, um, but it's not something I've discussed in depth.
Okay. So I'll talk primarily about psilocybin just so we can be specific, and that's what I work
Okay.
with the most. Many different applications or reasons why people would want to use this compound. Essentially, what it's doing in the brain is creating neuroplasticity. So we're talking about adaptability.
Yep.
Creating more neuroplasticity in the brain is a really good thing because that means that we can adapt and our brains can get stronger. Like we're not just like falling into this age decline. We can actually improve our cognition and our brain health over time. Psilocybin, many people come into it as an alternative to antidepressants or anti-anxiety medications. It's a more natural form and actually has more lasting benefits. Um, Similar actually to the way that we spoke about wearables, where we can go into a protocol, like a short-term protocol, and ideally get everything that we need, and then we can move on from it. Whereas if we're taking an antidepressant, anti-anxiety med, we probably are gonna be on that for life. And that happens quite a lot because the medical model doesn't do a great job with following up or listening to the patient. And so you could just be put on this thing one day and never ask another question and just stuck on it for life. And that's kind of a rabbit hole about what those things are doing to our body. Some people really need them, but now we're in this world of we could explore like plant compounds like psilocybin to actually create neuroplasticity in the brain. And depending on what you're seeking, if it's less anxiety, less depression, some people come into it because they just want better creativity, better
Mhm.
brain function, more clarity. We could be looking at old traumas, current traumas, but what psilocybin does in the brain is it amplifies our thoughts, feelings, and emotions. And so it becomes a form of therapy where we can sit with our bodies and get curious about why we have certain triggers, certain thought patterns. So, just for example, if we are someone that loops and ruminates on things, like we just can't let go of something that has happened to us, there are particular strains of psilocybin that can help us sit with that and go in a different direction. I actually just explained it to a client this morning. Roombas, like the vacuums that
Yeah.
automatically like sometimes like the Roomba will hit a wall and it like doesn't know how to turn around. It'll just be like,
Right.
"Wah, wah," like over and over again. What psilocybin does is it tells the Roomba like, oh no, you could turn and go in a different direction. Like there's more possibilities here. And so in that case where we kind of ruminate and get stuck, it removes the unstuckness. It shows us
Yeah.
other opportunities and pathways. That's just one example. If you live like in a more depressive state, like always thinking about the past and it's really hard to get motivated. There are strains that are very uplifting and energizing and actually are very action oriented. There's some that are really awesome for just expanding your creative potential. And that was like such a big um, learning journey for me with plant medicine is that I was stuck in this narrative for like a good, maybe more than a decade of my life where I was like, I'm not creative. My true self knew, like, no, I'm creative. Like, I grew up as a performer. And at some point I got stuck and this narrative took over and I didn't believe in myself. And there was a lot of self-doubt and felt like I couldn't think outside of the box. And what plant medicine did for me is it kind of shed those walls and allowed me to step into my creative potential that like I knew was there, but I didn't know how to access it again. And so just spending a short dedicated amount of time with it can retrain the brain to access these other states. And if we go through a proper integration, which is really important with plant medicine, the integration, like how do we take what we learned, the insights that are coming up, and actually integrate them into our daily
Yeah.
life? And then it's yours to keep. Like you keep these new behaviors. You can't unsee or unlearn these things that come up. And it can be really transformative for a lot of people depending on what your goal is or your intention, as we say.
I have a feeling my next question is something we could create a whole episode out of, but how do you determine what strain is for what?
Yeah, take some work. I would say that's when
Right.
you work with a practitioner. When plant medicine is so largely illegal in most states, and we're learning more about it, but it's kind of going through the evolution that cannabis went through when it first
Mhm.
came on the market. It was like, here, just take this, and no one knew what strain or dose
Right.
or anything. And now it's like, if you don't know exactly what color and where it came from, not taking it. Um,
Right.
Mushrooms are going through that as well. Where it used to be just like, here are mushrooms. And now we know like where it was grown. We know what consciousness it holds, what energetic quality it knows. So working with a practitioner and having a trusted resource is where we get the best outcome, right? Because you could potentially take a mushroom that gives you more energy and more thinking and thoughts. And for someone that lives in a very anxious
Mm.
disposition, that's going to spiral them more in that direction. And we don't want to do that. So we want to be really careful and selective about what we're pulling into our energetic field.
Right.
And then for someone that has more of a depressed state, like there are some mushrooms that are very grounding and very like calming. We don't want to do that more for the person that's depressed,
Yeah.
right? So we want to find that strain that really pairs nicely with where we are now and where we want to go. And that just requires working with a practitioner that knows the strains.
Yeah, it's funny. I say funny. First of all, psilocybin, if even for people who have used it or microdosed it or taken full doses, it's still a mystery to people. To the population in general, it's a mystery. And it's almost intimidating to go, "Hey, I was talking about mushrooms," like, "Mushrooms? What are you, a drug addict?" You get that reaction, and
Mhm.
boy, I tell you what, you wanna start a shitstorm? Discuss mushrooms at the firehouse table, because that's something that
Yeah.
people just don't understand. They see it as through a different lens than people who have already either dabbled in it or studied it. It's seen as such an outlaw thing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
for good
I think,
reason.
like Lauren said, like with weed, I mean, think about if you had talked about marijuana or weed or hemp or something 15 years ago,
Yeah,
people would have thought you were a stoner, you know?
right.
And now it's
Yeah.
like totally acceptable, medical, recreational. So maybe in 10 years,
Maybe a
we look
little
back.
too much so, in my opinion, but
Yeah, well, that's a whole 'nother story right there then.
Yeah.
yeah, that's a whole another story. I think cannabis is starting to be used as like a numbing agent, a dissociative, or at the end of the
Yeah.
day, people are just like, I don't want to feel anymore. I'm just going to, smoke marijuana. So, you know, with plant medicine, specifically psilocybin, it's like, well, do you want to get curious about why you're doing that, about why you're drawn to numbing, about avoiding, about like not
Mhm.
wanting to feel? Because our body is so intelligent. If we can get quiet and actually listen to those intuitive thoughts and communication, then we can actually make a change. If you want to make a change, right? Like, not all of us want to make a change, but if you do, if you're like tired of this pain point, I'm tired of these ruminating thoughts, or I'm tired of wanting to numb out, or I'm tired of, you know, ruining my day if someone cuts me off in traffic. It's just things like that where we have this opportunity to feel something different. And yes, as I said, they're illegal. And we've had 3 waves now of plant medicine. The first wave where it started to expand to the public and it got shut down. The second wave, which is like the
Mhm.
Nixon area, drugs are bad, they're frying your brain, shut down.
Right.
And there's enormous research about the healing abilities. And so it's actually finally in this third wave really gaining some ground. It definitely still has to, it has to gain more traction and go through legislation, and we need the science to support who it's for. And I
Yes.
think working with a practitioner or doing it in a medical setting is important because we could do it wrong. We could definitely have poor outcomes. So it's not something that we just want to read an article about and go, "Hey, let's see what happens." It's important to be really strategic and thoughtful about it.
When you're talking about plant medicine and the way you apply it, are you talking micro or full dosing?
I primarily work with clients on microdosing protocols. So it's this minimum effective dose, which is something we
Mhm.
talked about earlier. It's like, what is the
Right.
minimum amount that we could pull in for the biggest benefits? And it's a little bit harder because it's sub-perceptual. A lot of people want to feel something big to know that it's working, but often it's
Right.
like the subtle, small things that we do that really add up to lasting change. And that's really the opportunity with microdosing. And the benefit is you don't have to stop what you're doing. You can still go about your normal workday, be with your family. You're not going to be high and people aren't going to be looking at you funny, right? We can treat it almost as a supplement. It does require like more intention and we have to show up to it and do the work.
Right.
But the benefit is that we can do it anytime, anywhere. Whereas a macrodose, we got to set aside some time. There's a lot of preparation.
Set that
Um,
stage.
yeah, yeah. And I think there's applications for both. And Renee and I have done both. And that's where we're working with a practitioner to decide like how can we help you best? Like, what do you want to get out of this?
So I know when we started talking, we talked about a 3 o'clock kind of hard out for you guys. And this is something we could go in. I think I could talk about plant medicine and pick your brains quite a bit. And I don't want to be presumptuous, but would you be willing to come back and talk about have an episode just on plant medicine?
Sure.
Yeah, that would be fun. Yeah, I mean,
Because
we both have had many experiences personally and then working with clients. I just think there's so much to explore there. And I think there is kind of something for everyone in that realm.
yeah, I think I just want to do a deeper dive on it because it is a mystery, I think, to the majority of my listeners because we're in a profession where you're not really it's obviously frowned upon, and any kind of drug use is really frowned upon. Thankfully, weed in my department, actually, they don't test for THC anymore, which is a huge benefit for us. So that's because Virginia is a recreational state, and it has employee protections for use. So you can't be fired for using in the state of Virginia. Now that there are certain professions where they still think they can. Our county attorney said, nope, you can't do it. So we're taking it out. So we benefit from that. Um,
Hmm.
and then to the north of us, obviously Washington D.C., where mushrooms are decriminalized, and you can actually go into the dispensaries and buy mushrooms. So it's there's some worlds that are open to us in Virginia and in the DMV area, which you guys are familiar with. Um,
Yeah. Well, access
so
is cool, but I would still say exercise caution
yes,
because mushrooms hold a consciousness. Like when you see them in nature, they show up when there is an area that needs help, right? They show up when there's decay. They return, dead trees and organisms back to the earth. And so if you're going to ingest that, you want to make sure that you're bringing the right consciousness into your field. And I would say it's not just the strain and the dose, it's also like what hands did it pass through? Because it's sensing the environment. And so
mm,
there's been situations where I've sourced from people that am like, I don't want that energy coming into me. So you want to be really, really clear about what you're telling your physical body. So I don't really know how they do that do they call them dispensaries?
we'll just go with that. Yes, we'll call them
Yeah.
dispensary.
Yeah. So
Um,
I would fully flush that out and make sure you really know like who touched it, where it came
right.
from, what the strain is, do your deep dive on the strain. And I just as an easy resource for your audience, Mycology Psychology is the network of practitioners that I work within. And that's a
Okay.
safe resource if you want to learn more.
Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah.
So I'm not gonna hold you much longer because I know we're creeping up on well, not creeping up, we're skidding up to 3 o'clock really quick here. So first of all, thank you for that conversation, and let's get back to the plant medicine at another time if you guys are willing. But we'll wrap up with my final 2 questions, and I told you at the beginning I would tell you why I asked for an everyday carry. There's a book out there, and it's by Tim O'Brien. It's called The Things They Carried, and it's a novel about Vietnam. And it kind of talks about what they take into battle, but also what they bring out of battle. And obviously, we're talking about emotional or physical scarring or injuries. And so I bastardized that title for the title of my show with the things we all carry, because we all, as firefighters or cops or whatever, we carry something into our job, but we carry this shit out of our job as well. And in that vein, I like to ask people, what's an everyday carry? What's something that you don't leave home without? Because if you do, you're going to feel naked.
Is this a physical thing? Just anything.
It can be a manifestation. It can be a feeling. It can be physical. It can be whatever you want. That's the fun part, I suppose.
Mm.
Hmm. Should have brainstormed this. Um, if I go with something physical, now I work from home, so it's like I
Okay.
don't know. It's what I but something that I incorporate almost every single day. This is a device. It's a biohacking device called the Brain Tap,
Okay.
and it's using light and sound and binaural beats, and it has just been the greatest gift for me for the last 4 years. For I'm kind of like type A, very productivity driven, go go go. And I think that's a big part of why I got sick in my early 20s. I have a hard time bringing up that parasympathetic activity, and the brain tap has been a gift for me in that sense. I do 20 to 30 minutes a day. I like to do it after lunch, and it just resets my body and my brain and my soul for the rest of the day. I feel like a new person. And if I didn't have the device, I would still say like just 20 minutes of maybe some peace and quiet and some breath work and mindfulness. Just
Okay.
having that reminder for downtime is what I need every day.
Mm.
Perfect. Lauren?
I have two things. I'm going to go more non-physical, just to provide some contrast. But two things came to me. One is my skepticism. I take that everywhere
Mm.
with me, and um, I learned through my human design. Are you familiar with human design? So it's a
Roughly.
charting based on where you were born. It's almost
Mhm.
kind of similar to like an astrological sign, but it's I find it's way deeper than that. I learned through my human design that my skepticism, which is I feel like I can find something wrong everywhere I go, and it takes me a lot of like trust and comfort.
Mhm.
It's actually my superpower. Like I've learned that I can actually bring good to the world by having this skepticism and like learning through things that I think I can do better, or like understanding why I don't trust something so readily. And I think through biohacking, that's really important, like not jumping on a bandwagon, like using discernment and what I call healthy skepticism to understand if
Mhm.
something is right for me. So that's one. And the other one is just a playfulness. Like a big part of one of the things I learned from a plant medicine journey is in my loss of creativity, I felt quite rigid. And
Yes.
when things didn't go right or my way, it would really, I would carry it physically for a long time. So I take playfulness and I try not to take things too intensely or personally. So I always try to like infuse laughter if something doesn't go. It's such a great release for the nervous system, and it's a pattern interrupt. And I would say it's a biohack. It's like a how do I redirect and not let this like sit with me for too long
Yeah, it's very
unnecessarily.
important. That's huge, is to not let it sit, and I mean, how many years have you heard it? Laughter is the best medicine, right?
Oh yeah,
Yeah, I think so.
definitely.
It's
It
such
feels
an
pretty
interrupter,
good.
like you said. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
perfect. All right, so do let me ask for a book recommendation from each of you. What's a book you've read that you think is going to provide some benefit to the audience?
Ooh, this is one I read a long, long time ago, but it's still kind of like my health Bible is Paul Chek's Eat, Move, and Be Healthy. Paul
Okay.
Chek is like one of my greatest mentors and a teacher of both of ours, but he wrote a book that I think is accessible to all. Like, how do we just move a little bit better, think a little bit better, start to eat a little bit better? It's not too scientific. Like, I think it really is entry level for anybody. And it really covers the foundation. So, like, maybe we don't need to skip to NAD. Maybe we just need to eat, move, and be a little bit healthier day to day.
Perfect.
Yeah.
How about you, Renee?
I think I would have to say Boundless by Ben Greenfield. It's almost like the textbook for biohacking. So you wouldn't
Okay.
just sit down and read it cover to cover, but it's like, different chapters for, brain health or gut health. And you can just flip to that chapter. And then it's a really good resource of all the things you can do. And it can be as simple as tweaking your diet to a biohacking device or a supplement or whatever. But I just think it's a really good kind of broad view of biohacking options based off of what you're looking for. Makes a great coffee table book. Just flip to it
Mhm.
whenever you have time. Yeah, boundless.
Perfect. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
It's 3:02, so I almost got you done by 3. So
Oh, I'll be good. I'll be good. Thank
I
you
knew
so
I
much for
knew this
having
I
us.
knew it would go on for a while. So I'm very pleased with this conversation. So thank you guys for both very much for taking the time and just sharing some of that time with us today.
Yeah,
Yes,
thank you. So
great.
honored to be here. And it is nice to have an extended conversation. Sometimes it's like a drop in the bucket, and these things need time, right?
They
So
do need time. And
very
that's,
appreciative.
I think plant medicine is one that needs time. So I'll reach back out to you guys. And
Definitely needs
we'll
time.
see after the
Okay.
after the new year. We'll see if we have time to actually have a conversation just on that because I'm fascinated with it and I would love to pick your brains about it.
Yeah,
Great.
love to.
All
You're
right,
a great
go
host.
enjoy
Thank
the.
you.
Oh, well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. You guys go enjoy the rest of your day and enjoy it out there. Thank you very much. All right, take care. We're out. Kill this recording. Thanks for listening to another episode of The Things We All Carry. Head over to the website, thethingsweallcarry.com for show notes, resources, and to sign up for the newsletter. Until next week, take care of yourselves and remember to check in on each other.